Have you ever considered the fact that you are not the guitarist you always wanted to be because you forgot most of the stuff that you have ever learned? You've practiced tens or maybe even hundreds of licks, you have studied scales and arpeggios, you've practiced countless guitar solos. But the problem is that you let them disappear from your memory. You forgot them all, plain and simple. And the worst thing is that you just basically wasted a lot of time because none of it had any lasting impact on your playing. And if you continue to do so, your playing will be the same even years from now. How do I know that? Unfortunately, much of this comes from personal experience, as I struggled with it for years. So in this video I want to show you a simple solution that you can use to remember every single lick you will ever learn from now on. But you can also use this for learning and remembering all the scales, arpeggios and whatever musical ideas you wish to never forget. Let's take this lick for example. What would you do to make this lick part of your vocabulary forever? And how can you make sure that you will be able to play and use it effortlessly whenever you decide to do so? If you approach it as most aspiring guitar players do, you would just make few repetitions and call it a day. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You find a lick you like, you feel the rush of dopamine that makes you all excited and fired up to learn it, but after a while, and this might range from few minutes to few days, this all disappears and you are left with a lick that doesn't feel so thrilling anymore. All you are left is some weird finger twisting movement. So you find another lick, one that feels more fresh and inspiring, and you repeat the whole process again. But that is exactly why you forget most of the stuff you learn. You barely scratch the surface. The paradox of learning is that making something effortless demands a great deal of time and effort. And the more effort you put into something, the easier it is to remember and the more second nature it becomes. So the first step to remember every lick you learn is quite obvious. You need to practice fewer licks. Since each one of them requires your time and effort, and your time and energy is limited, your best chance is to practice fewer licks. And although this first step seems so simple and obvious, there is a reason why aspiring guitar players usually do the exact opposite. Because it goes against our natural tendency. We all want to be the best guitar players we could be, and so we want to learn as much new stuff as possible. It is simple, the more we learn, the better we will be. And this is true, but we have to define what the word learn really means. I always tell to my private students that the toughest part about playing guitar is not about understanding music theory or how something is played. That is the easy part. The toughest part is to persuade your fingers to do it correctly most of the time. That's what counts. And that's what real learning on the guitar means. It's not just about remembering and understanding, but about actually being able to do it. If you look at that lick again, it is nice that I can remember it and understand that this lick is in the key of E major and it outlines the E major chord. But if I can play it when I need it, then all this information is useless. I won't be able to use it. For real learning to happen, there has to be a balance between how much stuff you consume and how much you can digest. And since these days it is really easy to overshoot it on the consumption side and neglect the digestion part, we have to keep in mind that practicing fewer things will give us much better results long term. It might not feel good in the moment, but it will definitely feel good once you start seeing substantial progress in your playing. Once we are comfortable with the fact that we need to practice fewer licks in order to remember them, we can move to the step number 2. And step number 2 is all about making those licks stick with us long enough to become part of our playing. Once those licks start to come out effortlessly without you trying to force them to come out, you can be sure that you really remember them for good. And we'll do it in 3 stages. Stage 1 is quite obvious. We first need to start with groundwork, and that basically means learning the lick properly. Finding the right fingering, understanding the lick harmonically, so that is in which key or over which chord can I use it, understanding the lick rhythmically, and that means knowing how to play it over steady time, and anchoring that lick visually on the fretboard. In my case, I can easily remember that lick if I anchor it around this E shape of E major chord. But this is not enough to remember that lick long term. If this is all you do with the lick, you will have a hard time remembering it in a week. we have to dig a little deeper. After we are finished with the groundwork, we will continue with stage 2, and that is something I call guided improvisation. And as the name suggests, you improvise over backing track or some loop with a specific goal, and that is to keep coming back to the same lick over and over again. The goal here is to learn how to come in and out of that lick as many times as possible. You are forcing your brain to hear the lick in the musical context. And with enough practice, you will even hear that lick in advance before you play it. And you continue with this until you can comfortably use that lick in different musical contexts. That means changing the key, style and tempo of the backing track. Here is how my lick would sound in a blues context. And here is it over rock backing track. But we are still not done yet. Even if you complete the first 2 stages, you might still forget that lick once you start working on something else. We need to finish this whole process with something that can help us remember this lick forever. And that's where stage 3 comes in. And stage 3 is all about using that lick in a composed solo. And watch the following video and see if you can spot the lick I started this video with. Yeah, it's right there. The way you want to do this is to take a lick or few licks that are just freely floating around in your head and put them together to create a banging guitar solo. What this does for you is that those licks that were just freely floating in your head are now part of a bigger musical piece, and that gives them context, and therefore they are much easier to remember. And to make this all bulletproof, you record that solo and keep that recording so you can revisit it anytime in the future. This way it is impossible to forget any lick that you will ever learn. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. By the way, if you are struggling with anchoring your licks visually on the fretboard, this video might help you to master the fretboard.